Hi folks, I'm Steve Butler. I'm really excited about today's project. It's the perfect recycle, reuse, repurpose project. We're going to take this simple cigar box and turn it into a cigar box guitar here in the garage. All right, other than tinkering around in the garage, there's nothing I'm more passionate about than music. I just love music, and this project is fabulous. It's the quintessential repurpose project. You can get these cigar boxes at your liquor store, your smoke shop. They're awesome, and what's really cool about them is they're made out of mahogany. And mahogany just happens to be a great acoustic wood for guitars. They make proper guitars out of them. They come in different thicknesses, widths. You can even put a pickup. You can buy a cheap pickup and electrify these things. They're great. So we're going to get on with our project, and we're going to start with the body of the guitar. I'm going to choose this one just because it's a nice compromise in size. So here it is. It's covered in paper. This is a thin 1/4-inch mahogany, essentially, covered in paper. We're going to leave it. That's awesome. We're going to drill some sound holes in here. I'm fortunate. I have little pieces of rosewood, ebony around that I've collected over the years, different exotic woods, and you can use that and make a bridge out of it, whatever you like. There's a great counterculture to this underground thing called Cigar Box Nation. If you go on that website, you'll see instructions for different types of cigar boxes. Most of them tell you to use a 1x2 piece of poplar that you can get right off the shelf at any home store. I have a piece of mahogany that I just ripped and made it into a 1x2. So, let's get started. There's a great book out there. It's on Amazon, One Man's Trash, The History of the Cigar Box Guitar. Basically, I mean, cigar boxes can't be reused for the purpose of selling cigars. There's a tax seal on it, and this was in the late 1800s, so they just sat around collecting. So they collect buttons and bobbins and things like that. Before the big box stores, you could buy things cheaply. People in a lot of rural and poor areas, especially kids, would make a guitar out of the cigar box, just out of necessity. Okay, I've set up the table saw, taken out the regular blade, and I've put in a set of my stacked dado blades. I have about 3/4 of an inch set up on here. We need 1.5 inches, 2 passes. I've drawn my lines on the box where I want to make my cut. So I don't even have to take a measurement where my fence is to the blade. I just set the fence up to that line. As far as blade height goes, I can take a steel rule, my tape measure 3/4 of an inch. The easiest way is use your wood. This is what's going to fit in there. Just set that up, go to the highest point of your blade, the center line, and raise it till it's just about flush. You want to make sure that you have a backup board on the side that your blade's going to come through. When we start entering the blade, when we're cutting our notch for our fretboard to sit in, that's fine. But as the blade passes through, comes out on this side, it's going to tear that paper. The wood's going to splinter a little, and it's going to tear that paper. So if you want to keep it pristine, just get a scrap of wood. We're just going to hold that tightly against. You want to make sure your thumbs aren't in the way of where that blade's coming through. I don't want to fasten it to the box because then when I take this off, I'm going to get the same problem and tear off that paper. So we're just going to hold it down, make sure my thumbs aren't in the way. If you have to, draw a center line where the blade's going to come out. So we're going to go ahead and cut that notch. Cool, that worked out really well, but I want to point out a few things. Because you don't have this clamped, when the blade comes through that back end of that box, you're going to feel a little bit of pressure. You have to really watch and hold it in place because it can kick this out, and the last thing you want is your hands to come in the blade. It's not as scary as I'm making it sound, but I just want you to be cautious of that. But look at that, see that? Nice, clean, crisp cut. That's what we're going for, keeping this intact. It's really cool because that's the conversation piece. People see you playing away, jamming on these things. They're like, is that a cigar box? It's like, absolutely. But see, we got a little bit of tear out on the inside, but that's not going to be seen. The outside was nice and crisp. So we're going to go ahead, cut the notch on our fretboard to accommodate the lid, and go from there. I mean, the nice thing is, these come from Honduras and the Dominican Republic and Cuban, and there's a lot of mahogany used for the box. It's normally around 1/4 of an inch thick or less, and just so happens mahogany is used in guitar making, and it's a great acoustic wood. All right, we have our notches cut for our fretboard. Can open this up, just take it, lower the blades, and take it till it's flush with that. We're going to cut a dado. Essentially, it's just a large dado. The width is the width of our lid, and it's 1/4 of an inch deep, or the thickness of that. What I'm going to do, my outside blade, rotate it, make sure the saw is unplugged when you do this, and we're going to make our cut right there. And you can see how that line on our outside blade is right there. Turn our saw on, make one cut, then I'm going to adjust it, go to the other end, line up that pencil line with the outside of the opposite blade, make a cut, and then it doesn't matter. I'm just going to hog out that middle. This is the meat and potatoes joinery for the guitar. The other important thing is doing the neck where we drill the holes for the tuning pegs. We'll get to that shortly. Again, used mostly for the kids, but then turned into an instrument that some blues players would use. It's 3 strings, so they would tune them to an open tuning and do a lot of blues with them. The early Delta blues pioneers used them. We've cut the notch. Let's see how well we did. Now it's time to dry fit. And you want to be careful of these. You know, these are just basically air gun together, a few brad nails. So you have to be careful. It's easy to take them apart. Now we just want to line up where, as best we can, where the lid's going to go. This is nice and snug. So we want to close this, see how it fits. I'm a little off, so what I'm going to do is tap this. And I'm pushing down on the lid at the same time. There we go. The clamp just stopped it from bowing out, so I get a proper fit. Awesome. I don't even want to attempt to fix anything or do it again. That's a perfect fit. So we've notched this, the thickness of our fretboard, and it's nice and flush here. We took our time, cut our dado for our lid to accommodate our lid, doing a dry fit, and it fits so nice and snugly. I mean, look at that. That's nice and flush there. The lid fits nice and flush. That's so nice. And when we drill our sound holes, we want to make sure, again, that we don't get any tear out, because the covering is the beauty of this. I mean, look at that. That looks great. You don't get that much decoration on a proper guitar. Our nice mahogany. That is what we're going for. So basically, it just grew out of necessity in the poor regions, and mostly in the South, but you know, Just, yeah, out of necessity, realize. It's great. If you go online, you can see some fantastic things being done. It's really, really cool. All right, we did a dry fit of the box, our neck, our bridge board. It's perfect. Next thing we have to do is we have to drill 3 holes so we can thread our strings through. You want to do that about 1/2 inch up from the end. You don't want to leave it too close to there. It tends to wear away sometimes. You know, you can jeopardize the integrity of this board. You don't want it too close to the sound box as well. It can vibrate on there. So a 1/2 inch is a happy medium. So what we're going to do, I put in a 1/16 of an inch bit, small bit, in my cordless drill. I'm going to take a piece of plywood or scrap wood or anything just to back that up. Now what I did is I just divided them by 3. I started in about 1/4 inch from the outside of our board and then split it in the middle. All right, next thing we want to do, I want to put my Forstner bits in there and we're going to drill our sound holes. I set my combination square at 1.25 inches, and that's where I want the center of my Forstner bit to hit. On this one I have to close the lid, obviously. Now you just want to apply some weight at first to start it off. And you can see if I kept going, this box is going to spin. So now I need to hold this down. But I wanted to make sure I didn't tear the paper too much. So that's why I put some pressure down at first. So now I can hold this down. Now I'm through. Look at that, it's just like a pencil sharpener, isn't it? Nice clean cut. Look at that. So, started that off again, just to keep that paper crisp. I'm going to apply some weight to the box so it doesn't spin around. You can see how that's starting off. It's going to look really nice. It's actually a little sophisticated instrument when you hear the sound. It's really cool. You could put a little pickup in here and amplify them. But it's so simple and it works. And I think what really turns me on about them is just that. It's simple. It's a bolt for the bridge, but it works perfectly because it also is threaded, and that keeps the strings in line. It does not get any easier than that, and it works. It's efficient, and I think that's what I really am happy about the most. It's just really cool. I mean there's great sound in these. Okay, if sound holes are cut, we have our holes to thread our strings through. What we need to do, our tuning pegs. You know, I bought these from a company called Stewart McDonald, and they carry different brands too. If you're buying a guitar at a thrift store for $10 or whatever, you'll take the pegs off of that. So you don't want to spend a lot of money on it. These are important though. That's what's going to hold your strings up. What I did, I measured down 3.5 inches from the end of our stock, and this is going to create our neck. I have 2 pegs on one side and 1 on the right side, so left and right side, and they're slightly offset. Now, it doesn't matter where I place the one on the right hand side as long as I leave enough room, doesn't interfere with the peg for tuning. But the 2 on the same side have to be slightly offset so there's space for the strings in between. I took my square, my measure, laid out where I want those holes to go, have some scrap stock to back it up so I don't get any tear out on the other side, and away we go. There we have it. 3 holes, slightly offset. You can see how that's going to go. You can take some sandpaper, a file, clean this up. You want You want the bottom of the pegs to sit nice and flush with there, so it tunes up properly, and that's it. When I come back, I'll put the tuning pegs on. But you can buy 1x2 at any big box store and yeah, fancy them up, but they don't need to be. They can be quite simple. I mean, I've added, for the nut here, I just added a little piece of exotic wood I had, but you could put another bolt and it works just as well. So you can fancy them up, amplify them, or keep them dead simple, and they work. That's the best thing about it, they work. And in a couple hours, you can turn one out. With my 1/4-inch Forstner bit and the backup board, we drilled our 3 offset holes for our tuning pegs. I'm going to elevate this a little bit, just as backup board. Reason being, that's going to interfere against my bench, putting them in. And you want to make sure there's no chips or debris there, so that these go on nice. That was close, that's a nice fit. Again, these are slightly offset. What I'm going to do is I have a thin bit in my driver, and I'm just going to hold it in place and try to make a little startup hole for it, for the screw to find purchase. Just one in each of them at first, get that on. Careful you don't go too deep, or else your screw is really not going to have anything to screw onto. That should do it. These are tiny screws. You need a small driver. Again, you can see why I didn't cut too much off there. I don't want to make it too thin. These need room for purchase. Now this one is closer to the edge, so it's important there to drill a pilot hole with a thinner bit. Again, you want it thinner than the diameter of your screw, or else the screw has nothing to grab onto. But narrow enough. But you're so close to the edge there, you can split out. And after all this work, looks great. That's the last thing you want to do, is split out on the side of the neck. You could even use some reclaimed wood, a little bit of character. If you have new shiny pegs, just throw them in the fire for a minute. That'll darken them up. Ah, sweet. Before you put this in, think about it. If you're a right-handed or left-hand guitar player, you put your sound holes in, again, purely aesthetic, where you laid them out. But if you want them at the end, by your bridge, your strings, you have to make sure you put it on this way. You turn it around, they're going to be closer towards that end. So again, it's just your aesthetic. Now we're just going to dry fit this in again. Awesome. Look at that. We have our sound holes. Beautiful. That is awesome. I can't wait to tune this up, string it up and tune it up and get picking. You know, there's in the history of it, they show a cigar box violin, a cigar box banjo, which I'm curious about because I need a little resonator, a ukulele, which I'm going to work on next. And yeah, it's kind of endless. All right, we've got our pegs on. We're ready to glue up now. What I'm going to do, we're just going to put a little bit of glue on the exposed wood here. Going to put our fretboard on. Going to throw a little bit of glue on that space right there. Put our lid on, clamp it up, throw some brads in, let it sit for about an hour, and then we're ready to string it up. So let's get busy and glue this up. You don't need a lot. You don't want to make extra work for yourself by having to clean up all this squeeze out. There is going to be some squeeze out though, no doubt. Just putting it on the wood surfaces. Awesome. Have everything ready. You don't want to be running around scrambling when you have this glued on. All right. So now we're just going to throw a little bit of glue on our fretboard. You don't need a ton of glue. That's good. Close that up. Ah, beautiful. Now, little tip here, take some old bottle caps and you can use them as clamp pads. It helps protect this nicely. You don't want to mar the wood too much. And I'm just going to throw a clamp right on here. You don't need a ton of pressure, just to keep it snug. We have a pretty good flat surface on the underside, so I'm just putting my clamps right where it makes contact with the fretboard there. Beautiful. Now you can just come back and with a penknife and all chisel tip, just clean off that glue. You know, you get some squeeze out. That's a good sign. You don't want copious amounts of glue coming up over here. You're going to make more work for yourself, but you need some squeeze out that lets you know that you have a good glue joint, that there's actually some in there. Just like water, it's going to find its way in there. Beautiful. I went and purchased, you can use any kind of little brad if you want. These are called escutcheon pins. I have a nice little brass tip there. They're brass plated. Just because of this decoration here and decal, I just wanted to mimic it. But what we're going to do, I threw in a little 16th inch drill bit, chuck that in, and we're just going to put it, find our center line. And again, this is just purely for aesthetics. Now, I don't want to go all the way through. I'm just giving, the brad a place to start. If I go all the way through, then it's useless. There's no point of even putting it in there. We'll just throw a couple of these pins in here. You can use anything. I have a nice little hammer here for flat surface. And just... Again, if you miss anything, you have any questions, contact me. At the end of the show, there's an email address. There's also my blog, stevebutlerfurniture.blogspot.com. I'd gladly answer your questions. And that's all we need right now. We're going to let that sit for about an hour. We could probably take the clamps off in 20 minutes to half an hour. The glues today are stronger than the material itself. And we'll come back and we'll string it up. The back of the neck is a little Canadian coin. I'm originally from Canada, so that's just my little self-indulgence, just a little decoration. Instead of signing it, I inlay a coin. So that's the Steve Butler signature there, for what it's worth. A nickel. Clamps are off, moment of truth. What I did, if you look right here, where I had cut that kerf out, I made a saw cut in the neck. I took a little piece of scrap wood, and just about 1/8 of an inch, and I cut it off and fit it in there. I then took my hand plane and I just knocked it off a bit. You can use a file, a chisel, anything. That's just going to elevate the strings a bit so they don't get tingy against our fretboard. You want this to be comfortable. That digs into your hand a bit. So we're just going to knock off the corners with a file. Oh, that's sweet. Look at that glued together. You can spend all day doing this. You can just take some sandpaper and knock off the edges. Called breaking the edges in woodworking terms. Essentially just making it feel good in your hands. That nut we put on there, once I put the strings on, I find it's a little too high and it's hard to press down on the fretboard. I'll just loosen the strings, move them out of the way, take my file and just go over it as well. I think we're ready to string this. All right, we've got the one string on there loosely. We want to be able to fit our nut or our saddle underneath and tighten away. Listen to that. Ha! Cigar box, isn't that cool? Let's go ahead and do the others. All right, we've strung this up. I had a lot of fun with this project. I hope you try making one. And you know what? If you do, send me a picture. I'll post it on my blog, stevebutlerfurniture.blogspot.com. I'd love to see you do it. And as always, thanks for hanging out at the garage. Yeah, very cool.